watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the programme where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. Joining me today is Neale, founder of Griffin Property Co. Welcome, Nick.
Hiya, nice to be here.
It's your first show, so we'll try and be gentle. Okay.
That'd be good. That'd be good.
We'll try. And joining you is Byron, Crellin, CEO of Debt Squared Group.
Hi, Stephen.
Good to have you down again. Good trip, I hope.
Yeah, all good, thank you. All
Great
good.
stuff. Okay. Well, we'll get straight on with the questioning. And Byron, you're first. I'm a commercial landlord and operate a serviced office block and car park for my tenants and their customers. We've recently had a number of individuals using the car park of an evening without my consent to ride their motorcycles and all sorts of other things. I've had a security gate that is closed of an evening, but they can easily bypass this on their bikes. Is there anything I can do to stop them? I presume you mean legally.
Yeah, the rascals.
Yes.
I mean, this isn't uncommon for individuals to ride their motorbikes or to do whatever on car parks of an evening.
The thing we get in London a lot is skateboarders
Yeah.
who will get into an open
Well,
space.
the big thing at the moment for us across most towns are these electric scooters as well. People just taking shortcuts. And we had 2 people knocked over who were coming out of offices with people coming across on scooters because they can just whiz through.
Yes.
But in terms of our viewer's question, it's difficult to answer with a definitive, this is what you should do, because not knowing the logistics of the site, etc. But typically what we would recommend would be a risk assessment, go to site, understand where the trespass is exposed. Is there a consistency in terms of when they're doing this, as in they turn up at 7 during the course of the week when the car park's closed, etc. So after 7 o'clock of the night, we would then potentially put an enforcement agent down there, or bailiff as we know them, on the car park just to say, this is private property, you're trespassing, put some notices around the car park to say it's a private car park, etc. That tends to have the desired effect. So if they know that they shouldn't be there and they've been told by an enforcement agent that they shouldn't be on site, then that tends to be the success. But again, without sort of looking at the site, we can put recommendations on as well, but at the same time, you've got to make sure that it's accessible for staff and customers coming back.
What's the, isn't there a crossover point when it becomes a trespass and when it's not a trespass?
Well, trespass is technically if you're there without the consent of the landlord.
Okay.
So it's commercial private property. So you could report it to the police. Good luck.
I'm sure. Yeah, I was just going to say. I'm sure they're going to jump up.
Yeah. We'll be right there. ... So a lot of clients will come to people like us and just say, "What's my options?" And great that this viewer's contacting us on Property TV to ask that kind of question, because it is something that is a regular thing for clients that have got business parks, etc. With these car parks, we've got a site down in Grantham at the moment that is a walkway. It's a nightmare. We've got 5 cameras on that site, covering all the outside, and the cameras keep going off of an evening because people use it as a walkthrough.
Yeah.
But we're having to then monitor to see what they're doing. Do they stop? We've got another site in the northwest I can think of as well, which is similar. So,
well, 2 things there. I was just going to say, is CCTV a bit old hat now? Does it actually deter anybody?
yeah, I mean, modern technology is it's the answer, because a guard on site will need to have welfare, and therefore, will want to go and have a comfort break, etc. at some point, and we have to change over.
You can't just give them a little shed and sit in.
Well, we do that, but with a bucket. But CCTV, doesn't ring in sick. It's 24/7,
Yeah.
and it can be solar or it can be powered. And we have technology now that we can talk down a microphone to individuals on a car park to say, "You're trespassing, move off." So the signage on the car park that we would put up and the CCTV, 99% is the remedy that will assist our viewer and anybody else that's got these kind of issues.
Okay, good. It's interesting you bring up the subject of those electric scooters. I don't know whether they're popular where you are, Nick, but I just think they're an absolute menace.
You haven't got one, have you?
No, I can't afford it.
They seem to be getting everywhere, don't they?
They do. I mean, I understood it at the moment. Unless you were using one that's part of a hire scheme, they just confiscate them, don't they?
Well, I don't know that, but I was in Southend we got family down in Southend,
right?
And we were staying at a very well-known establishment on the front, and we were having a bit of a fresh air morning after, get rid of the gin and tonics, and a police car actually stopped 2 individuals who were on scooters on the public path.
I'm amazed actually, because we walk the dogs along that promenade quite a lot, and it's fraught. You got cyclists are not using the cycle path, and then also scooters that really can go anywhere.
Yeah.
And obviously you've got dogs on leads and scooters flying past. It can get a bit tricky.
Well,
really,
I think that's my other favourite subject is cycle pass. I mean, I think they've wrecked London. I'm probably going to get all sorts of mail about this, but I just think, for instance, where you have a cycle track, I think you should be fined if you don't use it.
Yes, definitely.
Because you can go down on Lower Thames Street here, for instance.
Yeah.
You'll find more cyclists in the normal roadway than that are on the cycle track.
We have got to try and get out of this building later.
Yeah.
I've actually had a conversation with a cyclist about this, and what they say is, so these lycra-clad over 40s people, follow them, up the road, cycle path on the promenade is right next to it, and they won't go in the cycle path because of, children or older people pootling along in there, and they think it's dangerous. So they think they should be in the road where it's safer for them to cycle and not use the cycle path, which is an absolute mystery to me. I don't get it, but that's the reason why you see a lot of these, lycra-clads going down the road, and the cycle paths are left for.
And we've got new legislation that gives them right away.
Well, that's madness as well, isn't it? I mean, I think it's madness.
Well, where I live, I'm on the outskirts of Chester, but I'm sort of more in the country.
Yeah.
And on a Sunday going to get my paper, I'm either stuck behind cyclists or a tractor. And now you're thinking, well, because 2x2. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love cyclists, but 2x2, you're thinking you can hear me. Just.
I think that's going to cause an awful lot of problems going forward.
Well, I think on that note, I think we
better
better get back to property.
Exactly.
So there we are. We've all got our frustrations out of the way. Okay, Nick, your first question. Given the trend towards using online fixed fee agents, would the panel suggest that this type of agent can function right across the property market? If selling perhaps £1 million property, the savings seem enormous, i.e. a few £100s instead of perhaps £30,000 or £40,000. Is it realistic to expect a successful sale result with such a saving in fees?
It's a nice easy question.
A bit long, wasn't it, really? Yes, I think it's possible to sell pretty much 95% of the UK property market online. I will agree that there are some properties, bespoke properties, slightly unusual properties that will need a high street agent service where maybe the owner's not quite so confident, but your general property within this country, your 2 up, 2 down, your 3-bed, mid-war semi that's been built, that sort of stuff, flats, as long as the vendor has got a basic knowledge of computer skills and is happy to do the viewings themselves, there's no reason at all why they can't use the online agent.
Okay. Do you not think when you start getting perhaps over the £1 million mark, do you not think that perhaps a purchaser tends to want and expect a bit of fuss and a bit of nurturing with the agent and meeting to take them to the property rather than just knock on somebody's door? Yes. Yeah. Well, it's the shopping experience, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, there is. The trouble is you can't cater for everybody along. On one thing. Now we've taken a property on recently, which is over the £1 million. I answer queries online to people. They'll go from the portals, the queries from portals. We send an automated email back saying go to the website, book the viewing, and they do. No problem at all. And you'll get a small percentage that'll ring up and say, I want to book a viewing. Go to the website, book the viewing. Oh well, I expect a service. And those cases, unfortunately, sometimes they're going to be a little bit upset because that's not how the online model works. Not with us. It does with some companies, but unfortunately, for the price you're paying, you've got to expect a slightly, a lesser service. It's not the bespoke service that you would get.
Well, I wonder if a
high street agent.
A better terminology would be it's a different service rather than a lesser or better.
Yeah, that's a lot better. Yeah,
I think because you know, it's the same as brochures in the property world. Look, you've been in the property business a while, and you understand. You know, some developers will spend £30 or £40 on a brochure.
Yes.
You know, which is hugely expensive, and that brochure actually very rarely sells anything, but it's the product that you take home once you've made your reservation. When you start getting buyer's remorse and think, "What have I done?" or whatever, it's on the coffee table. You have a look and you think, "Whew, yeah."
It's the
Done the
journey,
right
isn't
thing.
it?
That goes back to the bespoke agency scenario.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've sold developments and I've sold basically pretty much everything across the board, really. Go to a developer, and it's a bit of a vanity thing. They want the magazines. They want you standing there with the block viewings on a Saturday with all these people coming in, giving the magazines, and that's great. And for that, I would charge for the service.
Yeah.
That's not what an online agent does,
Yeah.
and they can't expect that. So, basically, the vendor who wants to sell their property has got to weigh up what service they think they need for the property they're selling. But my view is that effectively, 95% of the properties in this country that are not new developments or that are just coming to the market, that have been bought and sold, as long as you've got a basic knowledge of computers, you can use your mobile phone to take some photos, you can get that on with an online agent, or alternatively, agents do provide that service. So for a slightly more expensive fee, you can get your photos, floor plan, property description, virtual tour, exactly the same as a high street service provides, you know, but with an online system. And I personally, obviously, I would say it works better, but I've had scenarios where phone calls are missed in the office, you know, from the high street offices. The agent rings up because they can't make the viewing, so the vendor has to do the viewing anyway. And all of a sudden, these guys are paying, you know, 1%, 2%, 3% for a service that effectively they're doing 95% themselves.
I personally think you're in a good market space right here, right now, because in COVID and the lockdowns, everybody moved online.
Yeah.
So we were doing, we're managing commercial voids and some residential voids. We're doing videos for clients, and they were using that material, still photographs and videos, to do viewings to potential tenants because nobody could move around the country.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to take a break there. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking Nick and Byron more of your questions.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello, I'm Stephen Galpin. Welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm joined by Byron Crellin and Nick Neale. Welcome back, guys.
Yeah.
Byron, your second question. I have a number of tenants who are individuals who have left their premises during the pandemic, owing our company rent. What are my options to recover these debts? I don't think that's an easy question these days, is it? Because there are all sorts of protections now, aren't there?
Well, we're presuming that they are contractually there, so he recognises them as tenants, and we've seen a number of business collapse and business formations during the course of the pandemic. So we've seen a lot of property turnover and tenants moving out. Individuals are more so than corporates, because corporates, there's more of a footprint. Individuals go and then we'll end up somewhere else. In terms of our viewer's question, the services that are available to you, we do a track and trace. There's other companies out there that will do this for you as well. So basically a relocation of an individual. So we basically will start with, have you got a home address? And it's amazing sometimes when you say to a client, they'll say, Mr. Smith has moved out the property and he owes us £2,500, it's disgraceful. There's the contract, say, okay, yeah, no problem at all. And have you got an address for Mr. Smith? Yeah, it's the shop. Right, okay, so that's all you know about Mr. Smith. And I've got a mobile number, but he's not answering at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, right, okay, so let's work backwards. And the thing is, you've got to manage the expectation. Put aside, contractually, you're owed that money. I totally get that. Whether we're going to recover it, whether we can recover it, completely different thing. So the starting point is, can we find Mr. Smith? So we do a trace service. So we can trace individuals across the UK, mainland Europe. But locating Mr. Smith is one thing. Mr. Smith is a bad example because there's lots of Mr. Smiths, but go with me. So Mr. Smith, we've located Mr. Smith on the high street in Edinburgh. But what we'll then do is then we'll look at Mr. Smith to say, what's Mr. Smith about? Is he a homeowner? What's his business activity look like? Has he got other appointments? What does his credit file look like? And we can do that with open data source without Mr. Smith's consent.
What's an open data source?
So basically information that's available in the public domain that we can tap into. So we can go into Companies House as an example. We can look at council tax registers, etc. What we can't do is we can't go into someone's bank account, but we can see how many bank accounts or live credit accounts. This is bread and butter for you.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I'm probably kind of catch myself out here. In fact, actually, I'll start using you. So we do a trace and status report. Once we've done that, we can then say to our client, found Mr. Smith. Good news is Mr. Smith is a homeowner. So what we can now do is give it into the debt team. The debt team can pursue them. And you can do this on the threat of litigation. So you say to Mr. Smith, you vacated, there's a copy of your contract, you vacated with an outstanding balance, it just needs to be paid. And then you go through this cycle of, we found you, you need to pay it, you haven't paid it. The implications are if you don't pay it, and then the client will then have to say, we then have to say to the client, the recommendations would be either litigate or walk away. Look, I mean, we've seen the dynamics change considerable because where we can locate somebody or we've got forward an address, the individual might be on their knees. You know, they've walked away from a property, not because they're making profit, they've walked away from a property because they're not making money. And therefore, we often find Mr. Smith actually is, look, I owe the money, but can I pay £2 a week?
We have that with the residential evictions, or residential rent arrears, that sort of scenario. We have to talk to the owners and say, look, you know, we know where they are, but it's throwing good money after bad. Effectively, you know, it's
the thing for us is even before we start a trace, we'll say to the client, have you got a guarantor on it?
Well, that's the key.
We'll go straight to the guarantor. Forget Mr. Smith. Let's go after.
We're standard now across all our lets that we do within the office. For our current clients online, we try and advise people to do that. Is always to get the guarantor. I think that's a really important part.
And the thing is it's not just doing the guarantor; it's actually making sure that the guarantor is a guarantor.
Yeah.
Are they a homeowner?
Yeah.
What's their?
Is aware of their responsibility as well.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. Engage with them.
Yeah.
So answer to our viewers' question is, we can locate, we can profile, we can do collection services, you can litigate. Some clients will go, county court judgment. And then will be frustrated because they see these enforcement agents on television that anyway.
Well, we've had this conversation before, Byron, haven't we? I mean, the trouble is with the court process at the moment, it's so long-winded, isn't it, now?
Yeah, and there's a backlog.
Yeah,
so the remedy of doing a pre-legal debt recovery, more often than not with the likes of ourselves, it's on a no collection, no fee kind of thing. Loads of companies do the same kind of package. That's actually a helping hand for landlords, more so now where they've got considerably higher debt ledgers.
But I think I've heard you mention before, and I agree with you totally. I think the one thing this pandemic has done, or the circumstances surrounding the pandemic, it has made landlords and tenants talk and interact, hasn't it? That's so good.
I think if I look at our database, you've got regionals that have engaged and have navigated their way through this, because you've got this ring fence period where they can't litigate against debt because it's been ring fenced, because that's when the government put us in lockdown, etc. And the different market sectors that came out of their ring fence periods, we've seen a big high hockey stick trend of landlords and tenants talking and engaging. There are individuals and businesses out there that are systematic, refusing to engage, and we'll have our day.
They'll pay the price.
Legislation changes 25th of March.
Right. Okay, well, we'll deal with that in another programme. Nick, your second question. I'm about to place my first home on the market as I now need to relocate to another area for work. Could the panel please explain to me the difference between sole selling rights and sole agency? I've asked 2 agencies who've tried to explain this, but their explanations don't seem very clear. Now, I think sole selling rights is probably something that's quite London-centric in a way.
Yes.
It's probably not the norm across the country, is it?
In truth, I've very rarely come across sole selling rights. What it is basically, actually, if we start with sole agent, it'd be easier to explain. So if you went into a high street agent and to put your property on the market, they would say, ask you to grant a fixed term contract in exchange for the sole agency. So it would be a sole agency agreement, say for example for 3 months, and for that they'd give you a discounted commission. That's how it would normally work, and that would mean that they're the only ones allowed to market the property on the portals and to their client base. What it does mean though is if your friend recommends someone who doesn't come through the agent, you can sell it to them. So it's all to do with just the agency, whoever the agency introduces is what they get paid for in a sole agency agreement. The sole selling rights is slightly different. It all sounds the same, but it's slightly different. What it means is that you're granting that agency, again, the same thing, fixed contract normally for discounted commission, but the sole selling rights to that property. So nobody else can sell it. So if you want to sell it to your friend or relative or whatever, the agency is still owed a commission. You're going to be paying the agency. I would check your agency agreement very carefully. I haven't seen it come outside of London a lot, but it's worth checking because you don't want to get down right the way down the line to completion, and all of a sudden a letter drops through the door saying you owe a few £1,000s that you didn't budget for. So it's worth checking. And
I think since I've been working in London for a number of years, and I seem to remember that one of the leading agencies was taken to court over that sole selling rights business. The judge sort of said this is really an onerous contract, and it's not enough for an agency just to say, I've got a bit of paper that says you'll owe me money come what may. They must demonstrate what they've done to get to that earning point, irrespective of the contractual terms. So
I don't think it would be enforceable nowadays. Realistically, no. I think. All the online agents use a multiple agency agreement, as far as I'm aware. So you can use a high street and an online agent if you wanted to do both. And say I would avoid the sole selling rights scenario if possible, really.
Now, just taking into account, today's circumstances, everybody seems to be telling me there's a little bit of a, not necessarily a dip in property sales, but a slowdown of property sales at the moment. I don't know whether you'd agree with that.
Definitely, yeah.
So given those circumstances, would you advise this viewer to go multi-agency, sole agency, or where would you be?
If they're looking, if it's commission based, I would ask that if they want to save commission, they could go straight onto an online agent and also use a high street agent as well, but obviously inform the high street agent prior that they're using an online as well. So they could get, I think it's called a joint agency agreement. So you've got a high street and an online service. So if you sell it through the online service, obviously great, you get a cheaper commission, but you get a local agent also working for you as well.
Are the high street agents prepared to work with online agents?
I think in this market it's worth asking. Everyone's struggling for listings out there. It's we've got the interest rate rises, we've got the current situation and basic uncertainty in the market. So there's an absolute lack of stock coming to the market. So if a high street agent turned around and said they weren't willing to do that, I would question their own confidence in their ability to sell it. If it was me, I would take it on gladly, and I would be happy to work my magic and sell it from when I used to have the high street agent and try and get one over on the online system and then prove a point. But I think it all depends on the individual and how the individual feels. We still do the same advertising. It still goes through the main property portals across the country and all this sort of stuff. So there's not much difference realistically in the service provided. If, again, as I said before, if you can use a computer and answer emails, you might as well go online effectively,
Okay, all right, Neale, I'm going to say a big thank you to you for coming in today. Great information you've given us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Byron, great stuff as ever.
Thank you, Stephen.
Good legally based advice. I like that.
Very balanced.
Very balanced, very measured. That's very good to hear. And thank you again for coming in
Pleasure.
and your
Thanks,
contribution. So that's all we've got time for today. So join me again next time on Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin. I'll look forward to seeing you then.